Oh,
Jo-
I'm Gillian.
I'm Megan.
We had the article reopening the coronavirus era office, one person elevators, no cafeterias. And below you can see like the 6 feet office concept, which is this new idea for offices that they're floating. Okay, so an overview of the article that we had. It basically was pointing out that the post-coronavirus world is going to see a reversal of many of the workplace trends that have been dominating for the past decade. So like the open floor plans with the desks crammed together, the intimate conference rooms, and the communal gathering spaces that used to be so popular now are a health risk. So spaces like communal use, like beer taps, snack containers, coffee bars, gyms, and showers will likely stay closed when we first get back to work.
But they made all these nice spaces to get people to work together.
Yes, it was like this whole like trend, like the because I think it used to be like very much like cubicles, and you kind of had like your own little space, but like this concept of like the open, very open space, so everyone's like together. I feel like it had to do with kind of like a work energy, and supervisors wanted to be able to see what was going on and kind of make people connect when they were working.
Yeah. And then they did some of this other stuff about coffee and snacks.
Yeah, like the
People feel
more kind
good.
of elite workplaces, like Google is famed for having like this amazing work complex where they could take naps and they could bring their dogs in and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
There you
So many of the modifications to office life are unlikely to go away before the virus does, and even then, we're likely to see some permanent changes to the way office life functions. And companies are like going through the modification process right now, but that process is made extremely tricky by the state to state variations on public health guidelines. So for example, in New York, it's mandated that masks need to be worn in public, but Texas has kind of um, repealed that ordinance and said that you don't have to wear masks in public. So companies are kind of trying to juggle like what can they do, what can't they do. Like it doesn't seem like it's going to be a very uniform thing across every state, since every state is really in a different position with the virus and how bad it is there.
How do they know what to do?
I don't think anyone really knows what to do. I think it's a very unprecedented time, and it's definitely going to be a period of trying things out, and then what works stays and what doesn't gets replaced with a new idea. So some of the proposed modifications that the article talked about, reseating employees at every other workstation, and masks and plastic shields are also a possibility at desks. One-way hallways and stairwells. They're talking about staggered arrival times to avoid the congregation of people waiting if they're going to get their temperature checked when they enter the office. Plexiglass dividers between desks and circles on the floor to indicate distance. A possibility of assigning different days of the week for different groups of people to come into work in order to reduce the office capacity. And there's going to be no more open bars and cafeterias. Some companies are installing like making sure there's a kitchen on each floor so people don't have to take the stairs or the elevator to eat their lunch. Enlarged conference rooms with video screens for people to join virtually, so you can also reduce the density of people in a room. If elevators can only carry 1 to 3 people per ride, work start and end times could be staggered, and people could be taking the stairs daily, mostly able-bodied people. New desk essentials will be masks, gloves, and hand sanitizer. We're probably going to see an increased use of cleaning supplies to wipe down buttons, door handles, etc. And there's talk of removing disposable cups, utensils, and condiments in kitchen spaces to prevent cross-handling.
That's a lot of stuff. Why would a company do it?
I mean, if they have,
They just open back up and tell people to be careful?
I think the work environment is going to be extremely different, which we talk about a little later. But it's definitely going to be an adjustment because there's already rules in workplaces, like according to whatever company policies are in place. But now you have this added dimension of like sticking to the coronavirus rules that are in place to keep everyone safe.
Would you
So
want to work for a company that didn't do these things?
probably not, no.
Megan, would you?
No, I wouldn't.
David?
It depends upon how great the pay is.
Oh, okay. So you put a new variable in there. Okay, so we all have a price for something then.
I do have a question, though, about part of this seems to assume that the threat of coronavirus remains constant. I mean, I do understand the point in the temporary, but would these changes be sustainable? Would market factors demand these maintain after, let's say, a vaccine or cure is released for coronavirus?
I think it's really going to depend on where we go from like when the vaccine is issued, whether we're seeing evolved strains each winter, if they're talking about how it's going to be more intense in the winters, if that ends up being a thing that happens. I really think so much of it is up in the air, and people are trying to just assume that this is the new normal, so that if like it is the new normal, it's not another surprise, because this whole situation is a surprise. So I think just trying to do the best thing to like reduce as many uncertainties as possible in an extremely uncertain situation.
Almost like they want to be ready for whatever comes next.
Yeah. And I think that that's going to like, they're going to be putting other things in place too, to make sure that they're like casting a net to be safe for like even other factors too. I think it's like businesses are always planning for like what's the worst that could happen. And I think that this event is going to change how that's done for sure.
Good.
So some of the personal effects that we might see at work, a major part of the office experience is socializing with other workers, and with all these new modifications in place, the ability to do so in this post-coronavirus office is going to be very much limited. And the chance encounters of running into people in the hallway or the elevator are going to be almost eliminated, which might make it very hard for coworkers to get to know one another, even to maintain relationships with one another, which are really important, I think, for an office environment. If you have like a mentor relationship with someone or you're really good friends with someone, I think that's a very essential part of a workplace, and that aspect of it is probably going to suffer.
Do you think that handshake, sorry.
The impacts, why would you even come back? Why not just keep working from home?
Yeah, I think we're learning that virtual can be really effective, but I think there is still something to be said for meeting in person. I think there's an aspect of, I don't know. I don't know how to, I think we're humans and we like our like social gatherings, you know, it's very important for us to be together. And like, this is nice that we're like all getting to talk to each other, but it's not the same feel as it would have if we were all in person sitting around a table and having this sort of discussion.
Okay.
Do you think that handshakes are ever going to come back into style, or do you think that they're just going to be eliminated completely?
Who knows? Who really knows?
Yeah.
What happens with this virus? Because if there's evolved strains that are even worse, or it's really all up in the air, I think, at this point.
So some personal effects at home and some proposed modifications that were given can severely impact people's normal routines. So the way of doing things will be a large adjustment. So these changes will likely be even more difficult for people with children or other responsibilities. So like if you adjusted to your day-to-day life of working from home and now you have to go back to the office, that could be really hard trying to rebalance everything. And there's a possibility that employees could be working in the office part-time and working from home part-time, and that can also cause complications and disorientation in the initial stages of the transferring over. So some key issues from an organizational behavior perspective would be disruption of normal workplace processes, dissatisfied employees, stressed and anxious employees, and that kind of all goes together with your routine just kind of being messed up, like not being able to interact with your coworkers as much and just your whole routine being thrown off. Human resources will have more complicated tasks because they're going to be facing new problems that are presently evolving, because you don't know what's going to happen with Corona. It could get better, it could get worse. Management is implementing new hours, which has the potential to inconvenience and impact workers personally and professionally. And new protocols for employees and visitors are going to have to be issued. So if you have a team coming in to do a presentation in an office, you're going to have to figure out a way to kind of implement a new policy and procedure so that you can still keep your workers safe. And new health policies and procedures are being implemented in the workforce.
Who would be doing these things in the organization?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the first part of that?
What type of people would do this? Is this like,
I would say like the human resources department or like customer service if you have like a big department running, just because they're the ones who would be interacting with the people.
but then you'd have to get facilities involved to build some of this stuff. Technology people to make sure you have technology to work at home.
Right.
And then the manager who's got to look at the workflow.
Yeah, I agree.
Could
It would
this,
What's it going to be like when we do go back? How do you think it's going to be like? What do you expect?
I'm not sure. I think it's going to be everyone just trying to adapt to the circumstances that will have been given to them. So it's kind of just like as things happen, you just have to take it and figure it out because this is new to everyone. This hasn't happened. So you kind of just have to take it in stride, in my opinion. There's going to be organizational effects. So the lack of interaction with coworkers can lead to unhappiness in the workplace. And the alterations of post-COVID-19 can cause certain people to still be fearful.
So you could be, would you be fearful if, say, you knew I had it at one point and came in? Would you be afraid of me?
I mean, I feel like it depends on like people's personal like views of it. Like I feel like if you had it, you have the antibody now. So I would be less fearful, but I think it's always still a concern. It just depends on who you are.
Okay.
Could you, for example, see perhaps an adoption over here of a technique similar to what they're proposing in Europe, where you have now added to your passports over there, they're trying to implement whether you have recovered from COVID-19, some sort of paperwork to...
Yeah, I think it's definitely an option. I think it's going to be difficult because every business is going to want to do things differently, and New York has their own guidelines, as does every other state. So I feel like it's just going to be kind of complicated.
I think that like issuing like a thing on a passport saying that you've had the disease also like introduces the issue of stigma. And I think for people in the workplace that like they are people that are especially at risk, say if you have diabetes or you have asthma or you have some other type of underlying condition, those people are going to react differently too. So I think that there's kind of, I'm a sociology major, so I think there's like sociological levels to look at with it, and it's going to change the way people are interacting.
How do you think people have been dealing with the stress they might have been the stress that they've been experiencing for the past few months, assuming they're working from home?
I mean, I think the protests that we're seeing are kind of a reflection of the kind of times we're living in. I don't think that we would be seeing like a political kind of coming out on this level if people weren't like, they hadn't bottled up all that stress and that anxiety and the fear from everything that we're going through. So I think some people are dealing with it in that way and trying to get out on the streets and protest to feel like they're doing something, feel like they can do something, because we can't really do very much when it comes to Corona.
I also agree with you on that. Some other effects would be hour changes and how they impact people that have families, and just the added stress overall of all the different workplace changes. And all these issues can lead employees to become less efficient with their work and less satisfied in the workplace. And this could impact the turnover rate and the levels of production that a company has. So post-corona, the entrance back into the workforce, there's likely going to be an economy that is still recovering from the pandemic, and this could impact our ability to obtain positions as well as things like salary and benefits. So starting a new job could be a daunting experience, and the post-coronavirus world has the capability to make that experience even harder than it would be. And the way that training is done will likely be impacted due to social distancing as well as wearing a mask. So there are factors to consider.
Now that you all know this, okay, what can you do today to prepare for this new workforce based on what you've experienced in online learning, after reading this, some of the other organizational things? What can you do now to prepare yourself? And that's for all four of you.
I think that learning to like properly kind of direct all the stress that we're likely going to be under for a long time to come is going to be a valuable skill. I think it's really hard for all people, but certain people especially, to deal with so much uncertainty. And like as we start going back into the workforce and as we graduate college and enter the workforce, I think like kind of being able to stay calm and like believe that everything's going to be okay and that we're able to adapt. And like I think that if everyone kind of lets that anxiety and that fear and that uncertainty get to them, then we're going to be living in a much scarier world.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also think it's hard for people that are like they're more at risk. So people with asthma or diabetes, like Gillian had stated, if you have like such a fear of going back into the workplace, finding out a way to cope with that is going to be really important, because that could, like, if you're afraid to get out and meet new people and start a new job, that could really hinder your success in your career.
David?
I'm probably the odd one out here. To me, I'm looking forward to trying to see the best ways to take advantage of this personally to expand my career and opportunities. I've spent a decent part of my life having to be prepared for the worst to occur to me. So the threat of coronavirus really isn't that big a threat to me. So I would probably be one of the first ones out. I'm fortunate I don't have anyone else in my life right now, trying to see what companies are going to need people that don't care about the threats of coronavirus and the positions they're going to have to offer to those people, and getting myself set up to take advantage of that position, because there are going to be some things that they are going to need to be done, and they're going to have to offer more opportunities, more pay, more benefits to employees to be able to accept the risk of going into those positions. And
So you see it as an opportunity.
I do, yes, but I also know I'm probably in the slight minority of people looking at this situation, because I don't fear the coronavirus or the consequences of it as much as perhaps maybe one I should, and therefore would be willing to take those risks to take advantage of the.
Okay. Kira?
So, what I actually think is kind of interesting is, so I've been working at an internship for the past couple of weeks, and I have to come in every single day other than Wednesday. And I actually noticed that the environment that I go to, there's kind of a bit of an adverse like opinion about wearing masks in that office. There's a lot of people that everyone will come in their masks, but when we're like getting to doing our work, everyone takes their masks off, and I almost feel a little bit pressured to also take my mask off too, a little bit, just to kind of fit into the environment, because I'm new and I really want to, I don't want to seem like, I don't know, a germaphobe. But I guess like the biggest thing that I would say, like advice to people if they're starting their job, like don't fall victim to that type of pressure. Like I have people at home who are immunocompromised and all that, so if I have to wear my mask, I'm gonna wear my mask, you know.
Now, David sees it as an opportunity. Now, Megan, Gillian, and Kira, is this an opportunity for you too? Maybe not necessarily from the impact of Corona, but what the future may be like? What do you think?
Well, I definitely think, of course, anything is an opportunity. The way that work is gonna change no matter what. I think life is gonna be very, very different in the way work works, and I think this is a very good opportunity for people to, even with like in terms of organizational behavior, like people who are good with understanding like ergonomics, how to fix the office in order to structure it in a way that it's more safe and more active. Like those are types of careers that people can get into. And you're like people who are educational like theorists, like they're going to be sought out to help out with determining how these offices should run better and more effectively and more healthy.
Should I go back? I don't know. The last 2 points are that in addition to all of this, all of the workplace environment modifications that are going to take place could possibly hinder our ability to meet new people. And even going out after work with coworkers will be an experience that's altered in some way from our past norms. Also, businesses could be wary of hiring outsiders, which in turn could impact those who are ready to start their careers. So.
What have you learned from doing this? About yourself, or about what's going on, or about what you've listened to so far in organizational behavior?
Yeah, I learned that there's definitely all different angles to look at something. So like he was saying how it's an opportunity for him. I didn't personally see that at first, but now I see this as a way to like look past me, just because I'm personally asthmatic, so I understand how it feels to be a little bit afraid of going out. Like I'm always wearing my mask and trying to be cautious, but there's also a way to do that while still trying to find like the opportunities in it. So even though, you know, she got an internship, that's awesome, and not to like succumb to the pressures of trying to fit into that. So you're still going to have all these opportunities, and you can take them and just do with it like what you can work with, kind of. So it's not that internships aren't an option and that jobs aren't an option. There's just going to be like a new way of going about it, I feel.
Absolutely. Gillian?
I feel like I kind of feel the same way. I think it was almost like cathartic to like read this article and like realize that like we have been through so much, but we're moving towards like not like there's not going to be like a pure end point, but we're moving like kind of past things as opposed to just being stuck. So I think that learning about all these like measures that companies are trying to take was reassuring that like things are starting to not go back to normal, but they're starting to like take a new shape so that we can go back to a new normal.
Okay. Good. Any other thoughts? Okay. Thank you. What we'll do is, hold on. Something's not working here. Sometimes things work clearly. If you could stop sharing, that would be good.
Okay, sorry.
Something is going on here. I don't always
there is a safety feature in Zoom when someone is sharing to try to prevent people from meddling with it.
Oh, okay. There we go.
Unfortunately, I'm volunteer IT for my organization, so I've got a lot of familiarity with Zoom over the past month and a half. So,
more than you wanted to?
A little bit.
What organization are you part of?
I am an officer with the Civil Air Patrol. We are the civilian auxiliary to the United States Air Force, and we've been trying to maintain our unit as much as possible locally during all of this. I know we started this back as soon as I first heard the article back in February about that mysterious disease coming out of Wuhan, and we've been getting ready for if things hit the fan, and we were able to keep ourselves pretty active. And across the nation, Civil Air Patrol as a national organization has been pretty active in helping out with coronavirus, and locally we've still been active as a unit as well.
For sure.
I actually, I had a question for anyone who wants to give their input, but how do you think, like, in terms of long-term effects on kind of emotional and like behavioral well-being? I think like I've been thinking about this a lot. Like the domestic violence issues have been like scaling, and a lot of issues at the home have been scaling. Like for really young children who are used to being active and going out and doing their life, like how do you think this might impact the generation of kids that have been locked in their homes for the whole coronavirus?
I've unfortunately read some articles that don't put me in a good mindset with my worries about the future for some of our generation or the current generation. But because you're right, I've been reading about how suicides have been going through the roof. I think California, it just inverted the numbers. They're now having more suicides than coronavirus deaths, unfortunately.
And overdrafts.
Yeah.
Opiate overdoses have been
Yeah.
increasing across the country.
I think some of those get lumped into the suicide number too, which is why that's kind of gone. But I back in 2008, I know the people that grew up during that, you're starting to see some of the psychological impact of that event starting to manifest in that generation that had to live through that. I've been reading articles on that. I can only imagine with how much more pervasive this was, that's going to be even worse than that generation that had to live through the '08 crisis.
There's more information available to you.
That, and it also impacts everyone more directly. At least in '08, there were some people that it touched briefly, but not destroyed the family life the way this, or altered the family life the way this does. So.
You could be with your family. You could touch. You could feel.
Yeah.
Now we are still a little nervous about doing that. How are we going to get back in the
Sorry.
After going through what the office looks like, how are we going to make campus safe? I mean, if I took your list of making an office safe, I understand that. It makes intuitive sense to me. How do we do that? Like, you know, if I come from my office on South Hall and I come up the stairs and I head over to Wells, are we going to have one floor that's one way and I got to come back different ways? What do you think?
I've kind of been thinking about that like a lot because I think there's a lot, we haven't really had like a statement from the college about what's happening, and I'm going to be moving into my apartment in August. It's a weird thing where we don't really know what's going on. And I think even if they figure out the academic side, Geneseo students like their social gatherings, we can say. So like I think that we're probably going to see some like sort of involvement in like those affairs too, because how are they going to stop like all the gatherings for like pre-games and frat parties, because that's like a very big thing in college life. And like I think that we're probably going to be dealing with like another outbreak on campus.
Yeah. Also with classes, like are they going to reduce the amount of people that we can have in a class, or like how is that going to work?
That's where nobody knows. I can tell you they're planning 3 scenarios. Okay. Full density, which means we come back with safety procedures. No density, which means we continue online. And then medium density, which is sort of we reduce contact points. And that could be if you have a class that's got 100 people in it, that goes online. And then maybe you take some of the smaller classes and move them into bigger classrooms. But you still got the issue of how do you clean them after each class? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many issues. I don't know how they're. You know.
Also, what about dorms? I've been wondering about that, because are they going to quarantine an entire dorm if one person, like, it's just, it's very all complex.
Those are the issues that people are wrestling with. But even if you live off campus and you got 4 or 6 roommates, how are you going to, I don't know. I mean, we're making an assumption that this virus continues. It just doesn't go away, which everything I've read leads us to believe it's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, or like if it goes away and then it gets cold out and there's a whole entire new breakout, then it's like everything that you had adjusted to kind of try and moderate it, now it's just going to come back worse. And then it's like, do we go back online again and wait for it to be warm weather?
Mm-hmm. I know some schools too are like condensing their like academic school year, so like they're like taking away like Thanksgiving break and fall break and all that stuff and like compacting the school year into like 2 or 3 months, so you're kind of like reducing the amount of time that people can be exposed.
Yeah, we've been told well, you're already doing an online class, so for me to keep doing organizational behavior in the fall, I already planned to do a mixed class that we'd be primarily online, and then we'd get together for a few things. But we've got to be ready with modules. Everything has to be in modules. Everything has to be in Canvas. Everything has to be in Canvas. You can't, from grades to everything else, you got to use Canvas so that if you do need to go remote again, you're all ready. Mm. And I'm sure you each had different experiences with your online learning so far.
Yeah.
And Kira, you heard me this morning. Think about a difference between online teaching and online learning. They're two different things. Me doing a lecture online where you come and we're all like this and you get the same old lecture, that's not learning. I think we got to figure out collectively, how do we create situations for you to learn? And the example I can give of that is just what we're doing today. I mean, you had to take an article, you had to read it, you had to try to understand it, you interpret it, you presented it, you questioned it. You think you guys all learned from this? Well, then we're successful. And that's where this is a mindset change. The reflections. Did you guys all learn from the reflections?
Definitely.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, if I gave you a lecture instead of made you do reflections or give you a quiz or a paper, what we're going to learn more from? Reflections. I mean, I'm just saying that's the things that everybody has to do online, is if we're going to do online learning, create situations for you to learn and apply.
Yeah, I feel like active engagement is what helps the most instead of just read that.
It can be done.
Right.
Any other questions or thoughts? Good discussion. Thank you.
Well, actually, this hit my mind when you guys were talking about the opioid issues going on, like that. Those have skyrocketed since the whole quarantine going on. And I was reading some articles, and I think this is just interesting to think about, is that with addiction becoming so prevalent with like narcotics and really, really addictive and like destructive drugs, people have been starting to approve of using cannabis to help people to help like get off of these types of hard drugs that hurt them really badly. And companies like Purdue Pharmacy are very against it because they actually make a lot of money off of opioids and addiction. So just reading stuff like that, like I recommend if you think that's interesting. I really do. So check that out if you ever want to do that.
Yeah. And I think we got to be aware of behavioral health. Mm-hmm. We need to know, when do we need the uplift? When do we need that feel-good situation that we might have gotten by being with people? How do we do this in the new world?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we need to do it. I mean, if I may, even before COVID, you saw it in businesses, them starting to concern themselves with employee well-being, some of the changes in behavior, trying to focus on working on work-life balance. And I can't help but think that that's going to be an even bigger focus now moving forward, because they saw with the pressures put on employees after, again, 2008, they were starting to see burnout, lack of interest in work, people quitting the workforce. Trying to find new jobs to fulfill themselves personally. And this is going to magnify an already highlighted issue that they've been facing. So.
Great. Thank you, everybody. For those of you that do have warm weather, I hope you can enjoy it. Do something for fun. Maybe I'll have that as the next quiz that I'll put on a question. What did you do for fun? See you guys.
Bye.